Haniff Hoosen, the DA mayoral candidate for eThekwini. Welcome to IOL.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's lovely to be here.
So, you were the DA's mayoral candidate in 2016. What has changed since then, and why do you think you have a better chance in 2026?
That's a brilliant question. I think in 2016, the situation in the city was not as bad as what it is today. And I'm glad also you raised 2016 because what we're embarking on today, is a project that started 15, 20 years ago. When we initially, as the DA, saw the amount of deterioration, when we did our own analysis of the performance of the municipality, we were able to, at that stage, to actually make some assessment of the trajectory in which the city is moving. And it was at that time that we said, if we're not going to start doing something about this, it's going to be too late. And so in 2016, we decided to give it a shot. And we communicated and activated society to say, look at what's going on in the city. The outcome of that election was we succeeded in bringing the ruling party at the time from about 60% down to about 54%. So we came back close to removing the ruling party from power. Fast forward another 5 years, with more deterioration and more destruction in the city. We then gave it a second shot. And on that occasion, we succeeded in bringing the ruling party to below 40%. But what happened then? The single parties and the smaller parties, the guys with 1 or 2 seats, rescued the ANC and put them back into power. And when you look at what has happened over the last 5 years, you realize that actually the people that we must hold accountable for that mistake is those who put them back into power. This time around, the situation is very different. More and more people in the city, I think, have woken up to the destruction. Communities go without water for weeks on end. Massive amount of sewer running into our rivers and the oceans. The tourists have disappeared because of that. Our roads are in a terrible situation. The corruption is at levels unimaginable. It's just the overall degradation of the city is there for everybody to see. And I think that people living in the city have just simply had enough. This time around, I think people are going to stand up and say, we want to put an end to this.
Which goes to my next question. What do you think, in your opinion, is the 5 biggest issues facing residents of eThekwini?
The number one issue for me is the issue of water. Who would have thought 15, 20 years ago that we would get to a situation where you open your tap and you don't get water in the city? That was unimaginable back then. But it was a warning that we issued way back then to say, if the city is not going to invest sufficiently in the infrastructure, we're going to get to a stage where there will be no water. And what we said then is what we're experiencing now. So that's the number one priority, and my plan is to turn that around and give every single bit of energy that I have to try and fix that problem. It's going to take a lot of money, but the money is there. It's being used for the wrong reasons at the moment. The second thing on the list is to get the sewer infrastructure right. We have to get the city, our beaches, back to the blue flag status, because that will give us the confidence and give South Africans the confidence that actually Durban is back to normal again. You'll remember during the festive time, and even during the course of the year, we don't really have a winter in Durban, right? We've always had tourists roaming our streets, cameras. You'll see foreign tourists from all over the world coming to Durban. Durban was the place to be. Now nobody wants to be here. So that's the second thing that we have to get right. Get the sewer infrastructure right, get the quality of our beaches up and running again. The tourists will return. When the tourists return, businesses will boom. If businesses boom, creates job opportunities for more people. So jobs are critically important. But the city can't create jobs. What they can do is create the environment in which businesses will want to come here. The other priority for me is to get our streets and our roads right. I mean, that's not a very glamorous issue. people don't really take notice of the streets until there's a pothole. We take those things for granted. But wherever you travel in the city, you can see the state of degradation. And so what has caused all of this? It starts with the issue around finances. If the city had managed its finances properly over the last 15 to 20 years, we would not have been in this mess. And so we have to get that right as more than the number one priority. Because if we don't get the finances right, none of those things are actually going to come right. We have to close the tap on the corrupt activities that's going on in the city. And I'll give you an example. The Auditor General issued a report about 3 years ago. There was a tender that was issued for investigative services for 21 million rand. The Auditor General found that the work was not delivered, but the money was paid. And to this date, I hear nothing about them recovering that money. Just a few weeks ago, the city organized an event for Women's Day, got all of the lady staff together from the city. 2 million rand was spent on feeding them. But when you look at the quality of the food that they received, it's definitely not worth 2 million rand. Some of the staff who went to those events phoned me afterwards and said, this is just absolute madness. And then they spend hundreds of millions of rands handing out cash to all sorts of organizations under the guise of certain type of projects. You can't run a city like that. If you run a city like a business, where every single rand that you have, you invest it in the infrastructure, you invest it for the future, you will get those returns.
Which brings me to the next question, perhaps as well, is that you have these plans on fixing the water, fixing the sewage, bringing the tourists back. But how do you get to that point where you do that? Who will fund that without growing with the shrinking ratepayer base that we have in the city? We don't have enough ratepayers that are paying into the city to achieve some of these goals. So who funds these grand projects?
There's two parts to that question, which is very important. The money is there, it's not being used where it should be, and I'll explain that. And if we use that properly, you're going to increase the base. You are 100% correct that we have to increase the revenue base. So let me start with the first part. And I'll give you some examples. If you're running a business, and if there are people who are owing you 40 billion rand, and your annual budget is at 70 billion rand, more than half of your budget is sitting in debt. You have a debt book of 40 billion that people owe you money. If you're not collecting that money, you cannot use it. So you start there. The second thing is that irregular expenditure, poorly spent money, if I can put it to you that way. 4 years ago, the Auditor General says, you guys have spent 700 million rand irregularly, not in the manner in which it should be spent. Ignored it, there was no action to try and correct that. 700 million is a hell of a lot of money. Over a 4-year period, that 700 million rand irregular expenditure has now grown to 4 billion rand of new money that has been used poorly. So those are just only two examples I'm giving you about where you can actually get the money from. And when you want to grow a city and you want to increase the revenue base, as you had mentioned, you want to make sure that people are capable of actually making those payments. If you want to run the city like a business, if you want to increase your revenue base, you have to create opportunities for those people who don't have it so that they will be able to contribute towards the revenue base. And those two things work hand in hand. But you cannot create opportunities for people to develop themselves if you yourself are not creating opportunities to develop the city. And you have to start there first.
That speaks to governance experience, which you have said that your selection has been based on governance experience. But critics, even within the DA, doubt your public profile and your ability to connect with voters. What concrete strategies will you employ to win the trust of Durban's diverse communities, particularly amongst young voters and township residents who feel ignored?
Yeah. So I think the important point here for me is that if I spent all my life on trying to be popular as opposed to getting the job done, whatever responsibility I have, it would have been a different scenario. And I think for far too long, South Africans have been focusing on populist politicians as opposed to politicians who can get the job done. And that's the simple choice that they must make. I have about 30 years of experience in government, and I'll give you a brief background. I lived here firstly all my life in the city. I was the councillor on the executive committee. I was a member of parliament for almost 20 years. Whilst I was in parliament, I was the shadow minister for the Democratic Alliance on COGTA. And that gave me an insight and an opportunity to travel the entire country, conducting oversight over municipalities all over South Africa. And wherever we went, the problems were common. Lack of infrastructure maintenance, lack of investment, high levels of corruption, poor mismanagement of the finances, and that has brought cities and towns all over South Africa to its knees. I think we're at a turning point in our history where South Africans have now had enough. They've put their faith behind loyalties and politicians. What they haven't focused on is actually putting their faith behind people who can actually get the job done. And so I have a choice. My choice is, do I want to be a popular politician, or do I want to be somebody who can get the job done? The voters also have a choice. Do they want to vote for political parties based on their loyalties, or they want to vote for parties who can get the job done? And that's the choice that I'm offering the people of the city. If we leave this city in the hands of this government for another 5 years, then we're going to have to leave the city forever. Like the thousands of people who have already left to other cities to go and look for jobs, to other countries to go and look for opportunities. We can create those opportunities here. We can bring those people back, and we can create a situation where people run towards us as opposed to running away from us. And I believe it is possible if we just get the basics right.
And some of those people live in the many informal settlements that are dotted around Durban. Groups like Abashali Bus, Mjondolo have constant protests over broken infrastructure, water, sanitation, eviction, the lack of dignity in Durban, in the informal settlements. How will your administration engage with grassroots shack dwellers movements like Abashali, not just with NGOs and councils, to give them a real voice in planning and oversight?
Let me say something that many people don't know yet. Some of them might know. Is that our city has the highest number of informal settlements in the whole country. We have 600 of them, and they're growing. So there's hundreds of thousands of families who are living in absolute squalor. There are little children who are growing up in filth. To them, they have no dignity. None of us want to see a city where we have sprawling informal settlements as townships. We have to turn that situation around. I am very grateful that we have civil society in these informal settlements to bring them all together and have a voice like Abashali. I think they've been doing an amazing job for over the years to actually raise the profile and the voice of people who don't have anything. But I don't think that we've had a government that was listening to them. Do we have the money to change it around? Absolutely. I mentioned to you earlier on that there's about 40 billion rand that's outstanding. Let's just take that as an example. If the average cost of a decent home from the state is going to cost about 150 or 1,000 rand to build, and if you collect 40 billion rand that's owing to you, just calculate how many houses you can produce. Probably over 200,000 of them. So it's not impossible to fix this. The problem is there wasn't the political will to do so, because we had a government that was handing out patronage to stay in power. What they were not doing was using the money to invest in the future of the city. And as I said to you earlier, many of those informal settlements are relying on free services because they're poor. And we must continue providing those services. But what we must also focus on is developing those communities, creating opportunities for them so that they'll have the means in which they can make a meaningful contribution to society and contribute towards that revenue base you were talking about. But you can't ask people to pay when they don't have the means to do so. But if you help them to create opportunities for themselves, I can guarantee you South Africans want to make a contribution, whatever little that they can afford. Because the evidence is there. When you put in prepaid meters, people want to pay for the electricity. They want to pay for water. But if you create an environment in which they can live like decent families, you'll be able to actually increase your revenue base and people will make a contribution.
Absolutely. There's a lot of analysts out there who are predicting that no one political party could win an outright majority in the eThekwini municipality, and coalition politics will become very crucial. Are you willing? Which parties are you willing to get into bed with, and which political parties are a no-no?
May I just make one other point before I come to that, in terms of, because I did not answer your other part of the question on the informal settlement thing. When we get to the elections, and I'm elected as the mayor, one of the first things that I'm going to do is to invite Abashwali Basamjindolo to come have a conversation with me. And I want them to be part of the solution of how we can turn that situation around. Let me talk about the coalition question. Lee, there's been enough evidence now across the country on the stability or instability of coalitions. I think South Africa's democracy has matured from a one party dominating the state. We've now moved into a phase of where coalition governments are starting to govern, and I think we're going to eventually move into a different phase. I also realize that what we don't want to happen in this election is that we get to the elections and then we put together a government made up of political parties that create an unstable government. Because we've seen what happened. We've seen it happen in Johannesburg. We've seen it happen in Tshwane. We've seen it happen in Nelson Mandela as well, where you have political parties that get together, form a government, 6 months later we have a new mayor, another 6 months later, and so it becomes completely disruptive. And that's why I want to say to people in the city is, if we're given the chance to run this city with the full authority to do so, it will help us to speed up the change and progress that we can make. But when you have coalition governments together, you have to cut deals and bargains. And what that does is actually just slows down the progress. It creates an environment where tension can fester between political parties because they have their own interests. And that doesn't help for the development of the city. So I'm not entering this race to come second. I want us to come first. If we get to a stage of we don't get a big enough majority, we'll decide how we deal with that. And I think South Africans know that whenever we got into coalitions, we got into coalitions with people who believe in the vision that we want to achieve. Because if you get into a partnership with people who don't have your same vision, you're going to have those conflicts. But I remind you, and my message to people in the city is, help us to get over that line over 50%, so that we'll have 5 years to bring that change. Have we done it before? Because people can be skeptical about what I'm asking them to do. The evidence is there. In the last local government elections, we fought the Rondganger Municipality hard. At that stage, we won the elections by 42 votes. Just 42 votes put us in a 50% majority. In other words, if 43 people stayed at home, the town would have still been in the hands of the previous government. Thank God we got over that line. And look what we did in 5 years. When we took over that city, it was bankrupt, completely bankrupt. It was falling apart. We didn't know where to start. But Chris Papas and his team, with the support of the experts that the party has at a national level that helps us to turn things around, they turned that city around, that town, in 5 years. And Rondganger Municipality has just been ranked the #1 performing municipality in KZN. So the evidence is there. This is what you can get when you put your trust in an organization that have become experts in local government to turn things around. And that's why I'm asking people to say, give us that chance for 5 years. Judge us what we deliver after 5 years. But get behind a party that can actually make a difference. This election is not going to be about politics. It has to be about service delivery. It has to be about the bread and butter issues. It has to be about fixing the water. So if people decide to stick to their original party political loyalties, we're not going to get that. We're going to have another 5 years of destruction, and nothing's going to change.
Well, we can't separate, that the people will vote for what the DA can deliver. There are a lot of issues that are close to voters' hearts here in communities such as Overport, Sydenham, Phoenix, Chatsworth, and other communities. Do you think that there is a genocide happening in Gaza?
Leah, I want to tell you this. I watch the news every single night, sometimes until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm talking about international news. And there's just so much of wars and conflicts that are going on elsewhere in the world. And I sometimes wish, and I think, I really wish I had the power to be able to change some of these things. But I also come to the reality that I don't. I don't have the authority nor the power to be able to change what's happening in the rest of the world. What I do have is the power to change what's happening in city. And so what I don't want to do is to engage in divisive issues that are occurring elsewhere in the world that's going to tear people apart in our own city. I don't want to import the conflict from Israel and Palestine into Durban by dividing people on which side they must stand. I respect that there are people in the city who are either pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian. I need them both to join hands with me to fix the problem that we have here. I've got the power to do that here. I need their support to be able to do that. I don't want to play in the space of these divisive issues. I'm not running for the Secretary General of United Nations. I'm running for the Mayor of Durban. And so I'm not blinded to what's happening in the rest of the world, but I'm very activated about what's happening here in our own city.
Will the future Mayor of Durban be concerned for the people of Gaza? Will the future Mayor of Durban think that there's a genocide happening there, and as a city, what can we do, our role in the global humanitarian effort out there?
I want to tell you that I am a deeply compassionate person. It's who I have been all my life. I don't celebrate the suffering of any person, regardless of whether they're black, white, Indian, colored, whether they're Palestinian or Israelis, whether they're Chinese or Japanese. No decent human being can celebrate the suffering of another person. And that's my own personal principles. If I apply those very personal principles in my leadership in this city, I will make sure that we respond to where the need is. Not based on the way people look, not on the basis of how they speak, not on the basis whether they're rich or poor or where they come from. A decent, responsible, caring government will respond to where the need is the greatest. And that's the one thing you can hold me accountable for.
Thank you. Haniff Hoosen, the DA's mayoral candidate for eThekwini. All the best.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.